Hello, it's Katie here. I'm back again with another video on a bead weaving technique called square stitch. In my first video I showed you the basic technique and how to create a strip which you could turn into a bracelet or even a choker if you wanted. In this video I'm going to show you how to take things a step further and start adding some shaping to your strip. So we're going to be learning how to increase and how to decrease in square stitch. It's all nice and simple, and it's a technique that I use to make the necklace I'm wearing, so you might want to give that a try. I've added a link to a blog because this video forms part of that, and in that you'll get more information about the best beads to use and also links to patterns that you can try to actually put everything into action. But for now, let's take a look at what you'll be learning. Then I'll get out the beads and actually show you a demonstration, and that will give you everything you need to know to start progressing in your square stitch. So I'll be back again in a sec. Okay, so I'm about to show you how we shape square stitch. Basically, that means taking your normal flat strip and just adding on or removing beads from either end of the row to create some shaping. So let's take a look at a simpler shape here in this necklace. Basically, you've got your original strip that goes up this section. So we can try and block that off, that side, and block off that side. And then it becomes clearer onto the edges of that strip. We've been adding different bead numbers to extend out sideways. Same on this side. In fact, you've almost got another little ordinary block here and then some shaping around here. So what you're quickly going to discover is that you have to think laterally sometimes. It's not a case of just adding each row with its correct number. Sometimes you'll be working in distinct areas and shaping those, and then maybe moving back to shape another distinct area. And that becomes even more obvious in a more complicated shape, like this maple leaf, these earrings. So again, if you look, you have got a basic strip up the centre, but I've been extending outwards on either side, and I've been adding additional shaping on all of that. Now that might be scaring you and sounding terribly complicated. Fortunately it's not. I'm going to show you how to decrease, so that's how to remove beads from one or other end of a row, and how to increase, so that's adding beads to one or other end of the row. Both techniques are really simple, and it's just the way in which you use those will create the shape that you require. And any beading pattern is going to explain how you need to do that, so you're not going to have to work all of this out on your own. So that's enough waffling from me. It's time to get the beads out and let's get started and see how it all works in reality. Now I'm going to start here by showing you how to make a decrease at the end of each row. So this is nice and simple. I've got my square stitch strip here ready, and I'm all ready to start a new row, but I want to make it shorter than my last row, so I want to start one bead in. Now normally I'd be picking up a bead and stacking it on top of this end bead. In order to make the decrease, I don't need to do anything fancy, I just need to reposition where I'm starting the row. So I'm going to go back through the beads from the row below, and the number of beads I pass through will depend on how far I want to decrease. So in this instance I only want to decrease by one bead. That means I'm passing through two beads, so when I come back the other way to get my thread into position, I'm coming back through just one bead, and now my thread is sitting from the second bead in from the row, so I can begin beading and I will automatically have made that decrease. So let me just show you. The beading then is exactly the same as normal. So if I just flip my work around, then I'm stacking my first bead on top of a bead that's decreased in the row, and I'm just going to continue working along that row until I get to the end. So by doing that, I've made a decrease at the beginning of a row. Now, what happens if I want to make a decrease at the end of a row? Well, that's even simpler in fact. So here we are, we've got the decrease at the beginning of this row. Let's start on the next row, and I'm going to decrease at the end. So we start the row as normal, picking up a bead and adding it using the usual square stitch thread path. And again, pick up a bead. I would just want to decrease by one bead in this row. So if I just stop here, I've done it. I've made that row one row shorter than the previous row, decreased at the end of a row. So there you have it. It really couldn't be simpler. So just to remind you, if you want to decrease at the beginning of a row, you would need to weave your thread through the beads to get in position so that you're ready to start the new row with the number of beads decreased already. If you want to decrease at the end of the row, then you are literally just going to stop beading before you reach the end. So you can stop beading however many beads in from the end that you need to decrease. So that is all brilliantly simple. What I'm going to do is pause there, and that will give you a natural break. So if you want to pause the video at this point and practice decreasing at the beginning and end of a row, you can. This is of course something you can always just come back and refer to at any point as well. And I will be right back to show you how to increase at the start and at the end of a row. Okay, so here we are again. This time we're going to be looking at how to increase at the start and end of a row in square stitch. So once again, I've got my square stitch strip, just the basic strip here, and we're ready to start a new row. Now let's say I wanted to increase so that this row that I'm about to start is longer at both ends than the row I've just completed. I would naturally assume I start with an increase at the beginning of the row. In actual fact, it's not possible to increase as you start a row because you've got nothing to add on, nowhere to go. You would want to be putting on beads that are sitting sort of in invisible space over here. So if you need to extend a row at the start of it, you're actually going to end up coming back and doing that when you've finished the next row. So I'll explain that properly in just a second. What we can do is show you how to increase at the end of a row. So let me actually switch colours here and get my row in place. So we start the row just as normal, working along in our basic square stitch, and remembering to try and keep the tension nice and tight as we go. Now let's imagine when I get to the end of the row, I want to increase it by one bead. So that's kind of simple. I just pick up a bead, slide it up, and there we go. My new row is one bead longer than the previous row. The only problem is that new bead is not actually anchored onto anything because it would normally anchor onto a bead underneath it. So in order to properly make the increase, we need to start the next row. So we're just going to add the first bead from the next row on top of that increase bead. And you can see already it's starting to hold firmly in place. Now I'm going to flip my work over so I can work back along the row. What I have just managed to demonstrate though is that that increase bead and the new bead you've added are not going to be firmly attached to your work until you've begun adding more beads that are attaching to the existing row that is solidly in place. And again, it's all about that tension, so you're making sure that you're pulling your thread up tight at every point throughout the stitching. And as I said in my first square stitch video, your choice of thread might actually help or hinder you in this, so do have a bit of an experiment with different thread types. So I've completed that row, and remember I said I wanted to increase rather at the beginning of the previous row, but I couldn't do that until I'd made the next row. So now we can add on 2 beads, so the increase bead from the row I've just finished and the increase bead from the original row, and we can just stitch them into place. So I can then pass back out through my beads, and lo and behold, we've managed to increase at both the beginning and the end of a row. But remember, we've done it by actually putting the increase in place as we've completed a row each time. So I'm sure you're going to want to go back and review those steps again. It's actually not complicated when you think about it, but as you're working, you're always going to need to be thinking a bit laterally about your increases. So if you needed to increase at the start of a row, you've got to hold that thought until you come back to the end of the next row to make that start of row increase. Now, any good square stitch pattern that's involving shaping will explain exactly how to do this. So you don't need to be thinking of everything all by yourself, but you do need to understand how it works. So by all means have a little play around and try out the increasing at the start and end of a row. But I will also now give you a couple of links to some patterns that use a lot of shaping, and I would recommend that you pick one of those and give it a try, and that's really the best way to learn how to use your new increasing and decreasing skills and to shape square stitch. So I will leave you with those thoughts. Of course, come back and watch this video as much as you need and as often as you need. And just remember, whenever you're learning something new, it's going to feel very strange and confusing at first, but that's not to say you can't do it. Just keep going and everything will fall into place, and before you know it, you'll have mastered square stitch and be enjoying all kinds of projects that use it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully that's helped you, and you're going to be able to start taking your square stitch and doing more interesting things with it. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and that way you won't miss out on any more videos. I've got more techniques to share with you and more beading projects as well. And also remember, check out the blog post. That will give you some patterns to try so you can start putting your new skills to good use immediately. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!